Hello. I
Hello.
am USA Today bestselling author Golden Angel. This is USA Today bestselling author Stella Moore, and we are scared to success.
Yes.
uh, this is our first video, so we're just kind of going to be starting from the top. This was originally actually, it was pretty joint idea between Stella and I. Stella had the idea that she wanted to do a podcast. I said, "Oh, well, I've been wanting to do a podcast for a while too." We decided we should do it together and started talking about what we would want to talk about. And one of the things was that Stella took my advice to do something scary every month. And for me, that's led to success, trying to do something scary every month. And Stella, do you feel like it's been helping lead you to success?
Oh, 100%. It's been so helpful.
Good. Okay, so I feel like since this is our first night, we've got a few questions that we figured we could kick it off with. We'll just be chatting back and forth. If anyone is watching, you can go ahead and leave comments and we will be happy to answer them. Um, so yeah, I think one of the things that's just scary about being an author is putting a book out. Hi, Rara, good to see you. So Stella and I are both authors, have been authors for a while now, had other jobs when we first started publishing. So Stella, when you very first started your very first book, what was I mean, I feel like it's scary putting the first book out there for most people. So what was that like for you?
I was thinking about it today because we said that this was kind of what we were going to talk about our first time. And like my very first book wasn't that scary. And I think it wasn't that scary because like I really didn't have any expectations around it. It was literally just like, here's this thing that I'm going to do. And if people read it, that's great. And if they don't read it, oh well, I tried. And like,
Yeah, that's so funny because I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking today about like what my answer for this was going to be, and my first thought was, well, it wasn't scary because I didn't really think anyone would read it. You go in with very, very low expectations. I actually think publishing has become a little bit scarier for me as my career has grown. Just putting out books that are anticipated, that people are looking forward to, that they have expectations for. I feel like I get a lot more scared, and the more a book is anticipated, the more scared I get. So,
yeah. I
yeah.
definitely think so too. And the more expectations your readers have, and then the more expectations you have for yourself, it's like
Yes.
that anxiety increases as you go to a certain extent. And like, but yeah, like my first couple of books, like I really wasn't that scared because it was just kind of this random thing that I was doing, and it didn't really bother me if it didn't do well.
Right. Well, and I think that's the other thing. One of the biggest differences for me was that back then, when I first started publishing, one, I didn't expect people to read it. I had very low expectations of how many people would read it and also how much income would come from the book. And now, doing this full time and this is my career and my salary, there's a lot more expectations on it. And you went full time just a few years ago. Did it really change your experience, that first book that you published once you were a full-time author? Was it like a lot scarier at
Oh
that
yeah.
point?
Yeah, because there's so much more writing on it. Once
Yeah.
that's your income. It's like, oh no, if this one like before it was kind of like, if it bombs, it's okay. I tried a thing, and now it's like, okay, if I have a new release, that's a big impact.
Yeah, like I actually have more than just my pride riding
Right.
on this. I have my mortgage riding on this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you think that there's kind of that authors now kind of have more expectations going into like releasing early books? I feel like a little bit like people have higher expectations for their first book or second book or third book than I felt like I had at the beginning.
I think they do, and I think a lot of that is just because like so many authors, so many of us are readers before we're authors, and now like we're in so many social spaces where readers can just talk to us and we have those conversations about, what success looks like for us and things like so they know what or they think they know
It's possible. Yeah.
what success is and then so they come in with more expectations whereas when we first started I think for both of us it was kind of like whatever I'm gonna do this thing and you know
See what happens.
yeah and I know that like what I thought was you know successful when I started like now I'd be like oh my god.
So that's a great question though. What was your definition of success when you first started?
I mean, when I first started, I was kind of like, if I make any money off of this, like that's gonna be successful, And when I first started, I didn't come into it the way I think a lot of authors do now, where like I said,
Mm,
they're readers and they're in those spaces and they get to know authors and I didn't know anybody when I first started. So I had like literally zero point of reference for what I thought was
mhm.
successful. And I
Yes.
was kind of like, oh hey, look, there's 1,000,000, 2,000,000 books in the Amazon store, and my book is at like 40,000 in the store. Like, that's great. Like, and to me, I was like, that if you look at the numbers, hey, I'm pretty happy with that.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I think at the beginning when I first started publishing, I wasn't even looking for any kind of success. Success was not something that was on my radar because it was so early. I started publishing in 2012 when indie was really just kicking off, and so I had no idea if anyone would buy my book. The fact that people started buying my book and, it was like, "Oh, I can get extra tank of gas." Like that just covered gas. That covered oh, hey, that covered my college student loan payment. Oh, hey, I'm paying down my credit card debt. My massive, massive credit card. And for me, like that was so exciting, but I didn't really start thinking about success until I stepped into author spaces, which was to that date, that was the absolute scariest thing I had done as an author was getting on Facebook as an author, stepping into author spaces, trying to connect with other authors, joining author groups. And, at the time there was, there still is a stigma about indie, but 10 years ago it was so much worse. And I was terrified. I didn't feel like I belonged. Um, I felt like I was gonna get chased out. Like people were gonna be like, "Who the F are you?" and like chase me out or like remove me from the group, not, like or ostracize me. Like and so I would lurk. I was so scared of being there and of being present as an author in the community. Um, and that to at that time, that was absolutely the scariest thing for me was just stepping into other author spaces. But of course, that again, that led to success. That was something I was terrified of doing, but after I did it, I started making connections. That's where I started getting advice. That's where I started realizing that this is something that people can do as a career, that indie is something that people make and turn into a career. And without doing that first scary thing that absolutely terrified me, I wouldn't be where I am today. Um, and this was well before I was trying to do a scary thing a month. So, so what do you think was the first big scary step? Like the first thing that you did in your career that really scared you?
The first thing that I did that really scared me was probably my first convention. And because I had, it was one of those things that it was actually hosted by the publisher that I was with at the time. So even though like I had one book that I had out in paperback and nobody really knew who I was and everything, I was like sure, I'll go to this book signing convention thing. And it was another one of those things that like I didn't really even think about how scary it was until I
Mhm.
started talking to other people about like, and then seeing like everybody's talking about all of this swag that they're gonna have and how they're pricing books and I'm like, I haven't thought about any of that. I was like, I was just gonna show up and be happy to be there. And now I feel like now I feel like there's all these expectations for like what I have to bring and how I have to be and so that was probably my first like really big scary thing was going and doing this convention and meeting all of these new authors and readers and I actually that was actually the first time we met. I don't even know if you
I was
remember
gonna
this.
say that was my first convention. I was also terrified, again, of being, like, chased out of the space of, like, you don't belong, especially because, like you said, it was being hosted by your publisher, which was a small press publisher. I was completely independently published at that point. I was running my own show. I didn't have anything with them, and yet somehow I got invited to this convention anyway. So I had no idea I was doing. I was 8.5 months pregnant also. So I had no idea what I was doing. I was 8.5 months pregnant, and I'm going into this space with all these authors who had been published through a publisher and feeling like I do not belong here. Um, and again, made a bunch of connections and friends and all the, and got to connect with readers. And it was lovely and amazing, but it was absolutely terrifying signing up and then getting
That was definitely one of those big things that like looking back at it now, even though I was so scared of it at the time, I'm so glad that I did it because there are so many people that I met there that are
Mhm.
still like some of my best friends and just people in the industry that I still really admire, yourself included obviously, but like just so many people that I admire and like it was so helpful making those
Yeah,
connections. And I think it's one of those things that you don't really think about when you start a career as an author. Like,
right.
because we all have, kind of that romanticized version of what it is to be an author in
Yeah.
our head, where we're like imagining like drinking tea and writing, our chapters in the
And not
morning.
doing any of the admin or the marketing or any of
Right.
the stuff
Or
that
the
we actually have
networking.
to do.
Like you think of it like when you have that idea in your head of like an author, like their day to day, like it feels like a very solitary job, but like there's so much networking that
Yes.
has to be done, even for an indie, especially for an
Especially,
indie.
yeah, I would say
And it's
especially
like,
for
so that was not something that I really considered when I first started writing. Again, because when I first started, I was like, I'll send it to this publisher. If they like it, great. If not, you know what? It was a fun thing. I had
right.
fun writing the book. Like,
I
whatever.
did the thing. So you weren't scared when you submitted to the publisher. It was
I
very
was
off the
not
cuff.
like, it was very, because I had nothing writing on it. I was like,
Right.
if they like it, then great. If not, then whatever. It's,
Did you have a dream of being an author one day? Was that something that you were like hopeful for, like being a full-time author, or was that also just like there was no pressure because you didn't really think that
no,
was
I think
something?
it's like one of those things that being an author felt so surreal to me as a
Yeah.
career. Like it was one of those things that like, growing up everybody's like you could be whatever you want to be and I was like
Right.
and like there were points in my life where I was like I would love to be a writer. Like
Mhm.
that would be like my absolute dream. But then like reality would
But
set
you
in
don't
and
think
be
it's
like
real.
I
Yeah.
could settle for being like an editor, maybe. Like I could probably be an editor. Like then I'd get to read books all day at least.
Yeah.
Like I would try and like bring myself down from that like pie in the sky type thing. So like yeah, so when I submitted that first book, it was very just kind of like if it happens then it's great. If not,
Yeah.
then whatever. I was never gonna be like a best-selling author. Like that's not a thing that was gonna ever happen. And then yeah,
Yeah, and
four
then
years,
yeah.
5 years later, 6 years later.
I in 2011 I wrote myself a note. It was for this like it was for some challenge that I was doing, but I wrote myself a note that was supposed to be open in 10 years. So it was supposed to be open in 2021. And in the note I was supposed to write all the things that I wanted to have happen over the next 10 years, like project into the future, what I wanted my future to look like. At that time I was engaged to my husband, so I was like we'll be married. If we have like a kid or two, that would be great. I've been writing for a website. Wouldn't it be cool if like I had a published book by 2021? And then I had no idea that the next year I would actually start publishing. And by 2021, I was full time. So I opened up this note in 2021 and I'm reading through it and I'm like sobbing because I'm not only have written a book. I've written at that point, I think like 50 or 60 books published. I had two through an agent and traditional publishers, USA Today bestselling author, full-time author. Like it was nothing what I expected my life to look like. It was so much better.
So much better. Like,
But
if
I
I
think
could go back to high school me and be like, hey, guess what? We write romance novels for a living. Like, high school me would be like, get
oh,
out of
high
here.
school
Like,
me would
there's
not
no
have
way
been
that's
happy.
real.
High school me would have been like, you mean sci-fi fantasy? Like that's what I wanted in high school when I would think about writing. That was what I wanted to write. It was like Robert Jordan, Wheel of
I've
Time.
always been a romance girly.
Yeah,
Always been a romance girl. And I used to get so much crap for it in high school.
right.
Like, I
Well, 'cause
like
girls can't enjoy things, so
right, right. Well, then, like, growing up, like, I would get just, people who would make fun of me all the time just for
yeah.
reading all the time in general. And then when
Yes,
I started reading romance, like, that was like this huge thing in high school that everybody was like, what, why are you reading? Like, just, oh my God, all
right.
the time. So if I could tell, like, high school me that we get to write smutty romance novels for a living, high school me would be like, that is the best thing ever.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do think it's one of those things where, I look back and I see the path that got me here, and a lot of it is taking advantage of opportunities that came my way. Um, and a lot of it is doing things that scared me because without doing those things, I wouldn't be where I am in my career. Um,
And
so we
sometimes
kind
those
of
go
talked,
hand in hand.
yeah,
Sometimes those opportunities come your way and you're like, no,
right.
that's
You're like,
not a thing I'm going to do.
how do I do that? Like, yeah, no, like last year when Shayla Black and Sierra Cartwright reached out to me to see if I wanted to be like on a Kickstarter with them. Absolutely terrifying. Did I say yes? Yes, and that was part of it. That was like, well, this is my scary thing for the month is saying yes to this project. Um, and hoping that I live up to and it comes back to expectation, hoping that I live up to that expectation that not only I have for myself being part of this project, but that they have from inviting me because I don't want to disappoint them. Um, so I think that is a big part of it. So we have been talking about like the scariest steps of our early career. So like now you and we've both been doing this for a while. We're both full time. We've both hit a list. What are you scared of now?
Ooh, that. I think the stuff that I'm scared of now is just like those big next steps that come along.
Mhm.
Like, you know, let's do a podcast was fun. And then it was like, oh my God, we're going to do a podcast. Like,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
a lot of the big scary stuff now comes from a place of like, who do I think I am to be doing that? Like, there's still like so much of that imposter syndrome, and like, and especially because like I've surrounded myself with all of these amazing people with these amazing careers, and I'm like, I still don't feel like I quite fit in.
And
So,
yet you're surrounded by all these amazing people with all these amazing careers who think you do fit in.
and that's wild to me. And then there's,
Right?
so I think part of that like
Same.
scariness is like, okay, so when are they going to realize that I don't
Right.
belong in this group?
At some point, these people are going to realize that one of these things is not like the other, and it's me.
They've made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
that
I think for
imposter
me,
syndrome is awful.
that's the biggest thing is just like getting over that idea that like I don't belong in these places and these
Mhm.
spaces and that like these people are up here and I'm still like down here, so I still don't quite like fit in with this group. And nobody's gonna want to hear anything that I have to say, because
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not Golden Angel or
Which is like, I mean, it's crazy for me because, I was telling my husband this the other day, I know how much I don't know. Like, I know how much I don't know. And because I know how much I don't know, there are times that I forget how much I do know. And so it is always kind of, I'm constantly struggling with imposter syndrome, especially, I wanted to do just the tip on TikTok thinking maybe this will help a few people. And I did not expect my TikTok channel to blow up the way that it did.
a
And now
few
I'm
people.
right? And now I'm like, "Oh god, what if I give bad advice?" Like, that's terrifying. What if I give terrible advice to someone and now I'm doing these one-on-one consultations and I love it. I think I'm helping people, but I still have that fear of like, what if I'm wrong about everything? And I'm just giving like terrible advice that people are paying attention to. And that's what scares me now is that I'm like out there thinking I'm doing good and actually like harming people.
I can almost guarantee you that there's nobody who's watching this and they're like, yes, Golden Angel ruined my career. I was
Man, I
actually
hope
just talking
not.
to my husband before we started this, because I hit a new milestone with my pre-orders, and we were, which because I've been like keeping you
I know.
updated all day, that I was getting closer and closer, and I
I was
finally hit
here for you in person. So
it. But I was telling him, I was like, I've got my how much I love my spreadsheets with my little formulas and stuff, and I've got one that tells me, I've got a formula that tells me what percentage I've increased from my last one, and then I've also got one now. I've got a column that tells me like what my percentage increase was from my baseline, my very first wide book, because I started KU. So
yeah,
my very first wide book, which was a couple years ago, I think November 2022, um, and I've had 150% increase in my pre-orders from
that's
that book to this
amazing.
book. And
That's
so
amazing.
much of it is the advice that I've followed from you. So like, hopefully that helps to quell your
It doesn't. I mean, that's the thing. It does. I wish it did, but it's like, I always feel like, for me, it's like, oh, well, I lucked out. It worked for them. It was lucky that it worked for them.
So it's just
Cool.
lucky that it keeps happening over and over and
Hey,
over.
exactly. Like, it's just, I'm riding this wave of luck and at some
Girl, you
point
are
it's
the
going
luckiest
to
person in
end.
the world. Then you should go buy some lottery tickets.
But I mean, that's where my scary stuff is at because at this point I'm pretty used to putting out the books. I have certain expectations. If the books stopped meeting those expectations, like if stuff started falling off, if stuff like that, then I think I would get scared of that thing again. But what's scarier for me at this point is not so much the publishing of the fiction, but the stuff that I've started doing advice wise and doing like I wanted to do a podcast, but I've been sitting on that idea for close to a year now because I'm like, I don't want to do it alone. What if it's terrible? What if what if this fails? And the truth is, what if it fails? Nothing would happen. Like, but I still feel that fear. Um, and it's so much easier to do it with a friend. So thank you. A little less
Well, and I
scary.
think for like so many of us, like that's what we forget. Like we get so caught up in the fear that we forget that like if you look at the worst thing that could happen, the worst thing is really not that bad.
Nothing. Yeah.
It's so rare that the worst thing that could happen is that your entire career is just over. Like
Right.
if I haven't like the last book that I had that came out definitely did not meet my expectations sales wise. You and I have talked about it. Like
Yeah.
it didn't hit. Like I feel like there were definitely things that I did that were missteps along the way with that release. And from the title to, oddly enough, the blurb, which for the for the person that everybody
Blurb
comes to for their
queen.
blurbs, I definitely like it was a good blurb. It just wasn't the
Hmm.
right blurb for the market.
Yeah.
And, there were things that I did that were definitely missteps along the way. So, and now I'm kind of like almost glad that I did that because now I'm like, okay, that's maybe not worst case scenario, but it is things that I've been afraid of
Yeah.
happening, and they happened, and
And your
it
career
wasn't the end
wasn't
of the
over.
world.
Yeah,
Yes, it's
your
not the end
career
of the
wasn't over.
world. My career's not over. I was
And
still
this
able
book
to
is
come
doing
pay my
and the
bills.
your book
Like,
that's coming out tomorrow, which is part of the same series, is doing
yes,
amazing
is blowing
already.
my expectations out of the water, which,
Yeah,
like, it's so funny to me because I definitely expected those two books to be swapped. I thought
right.
my plus size good girl with her bad boy daddy was going to be my book that just like everybody was anticipating. And no, it's my MFF that's coming out that I thought everybody was going to be like, I don't really want to read that.
Right. And I mean, which really goes to show that like sometimes our expectations aren't in line with the market. That's something we can't control. But it's not even when like the worst happens and a book, the next book doesn't grow. It doesn't, we're in like we get into this mindset of it always has to be growth. It always has to be growth mentality. The sales always have to go up. The income always has to go up, and that's just not, it's not realistic, for one, and two, we're gonna make mistakes. Biggest mistake I made last year was that I only released 3 of my main series books. Normally I release 4 main series books a year, one every 3 months, and that helps keep my income consistent. And I didn't do that last year. I only released 3, and I thought that doing 2 side projects would make up for that 4th book not being in the main series. It didn't, and I'm still paying for it this year. On the other hand, I still had a six-figure year last year. I still have really successful series ongoing this year. I'm definitely releasing 4 main series books this year. I learned that lesson. I won't be doing that, I won't be pulling back from that again. Um, but it was one of those like, oh, my income dropped substantially, but I'm okay. And I do think that there is something to that, like, of, that's just not a scary thing I would have chosen. Um, but it is good to know, like, the world didn't end. My career is still ongoing. I can still pay my mortgage. Um, it's finances are a little tighter than they were the year before, but it's also not the end of the world. And it does help, I think, to really look at like, okay, well, what's the worst that's happened? The worst that's happened is that we had to tighten our belts. That was it. And as long now that I've learned this, I've learned a lesson. So that was the best thing to come out of it. And now I'm not going to repeat that in the future. And I'm doing the things this year that I know I need to do to get what I want, the level, to be performing at the level that I want. Um,
And I think that's really important to note that, like, we're doing this podcast about scared to success and like the scary things that we've done that have been successful and led to
mm,
success. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that like there's stuff that we've done that may or may not have been scary at the time that didn't lead to success. So like the point is do it anyway, because
yeah.
some of it's going to be super successful and some of it's not, but it's still okay, even
Yes.
if it's not the wild success that you want it to be, or even if it completely crashes and burns. Like,
And I've got to say, like, the things that I've done for fun that I wasn't scared of tend to be the things that don't do as well. It is the scary things that I do, the things that I am scared of that bring me, that I feel have progressed my career forward, versus things that I do. I mean, sometimes, like sometimes, but things that I do for fun a lot of the time just don't have the same impact um on my career and on me that the scary things do. Um the doing something that I'm like, well, I'm not ready for that, but then I have to do it anyway because I've decided that I'm doing it. And the other thing is, one of the scary things that I've done is I've reached out to authors that I'm intimidated by to ask for like newsletter swaps, or invite them to like my Facebook release party. And the worst thing that they do is they politely and kindly say no, but I'm terrified of it, and it is one of those things. Opportunities come my way sometimes that are so scary, but I say yes, feeling like, oh God, I don't belong. Um, but again, it's something that propels me forward, because usually the reason I feel like I don't belong is because it's an opportunity that's putting me in the company of people who I would like to belong to that level where they are. Um, but because I don't feel like I do, but then I'm just like, I'm just gonna be here and hopefully no one will notice.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
much so. Like, and that's, and I think like there is, there's kind of a correlation there. Like, it's scary because we know that it could put us in, on a level that we haven't been before. And that's a
Mhm.
scary thing in and of itself,
Oh yeah.
is, making that jump to the next level of your career or
Success is
success,
scary.
or
Success is
putting yourself more
scary.
in the public eye,
Yes.
things like that. So there's a correlation there between how scary it is and how much it impacts your success, because there's, a lot of times the scary stuff is the stuff that's got the most writing on it.
Mhm.
And, that's why it's scary. Because you're like, I'm risking, you know, I'm risking my pride, I'm risking my
Right.
career, or at least it feels like you're risking your
It
career.
does.
Like we
Yeah.
said, hardly ever are you actually risking your career, but like it feels like you're risking everything sometimes
Everything.
for
Yeah.
these scary things. And it's because it is a big step and it does make a big impact to your
Yes.
career.
I think a lot of the scariest things also really have to do with being seen more, like
Very much so.
you're going in front of a bigger audience, being invited to that project with Shayla and Sierra. I'm like, I think their readers would love my books. But what if they don't? We write in the same genre. That we should have the same readers. We should have readers who read all of us. But what if they hate me? And those are the voices that go on in your head. And I think there really is something scary about the idea of success, because where we're at, the level that you're currently on, that's safe. You know what that feels like, which means that taking a step up, you're no longer in a space that you are used to. You're no longer in a space that you're comfortable with. You don't always know what to expect. Um, One of the scariest things for me was getting a BookBub feature deal on a free book, right? If a historical romance, right when the first Bridgerton season dropped. And I was watching the day that the BookBub went. I'm watching and I'm going, I have 5,000 people have downloaded this book, 10,000 people have downloaded this book, 15,000 people have downloaded. I got up to almost 19,000 people in one day. And I was so nauseous all day. I felt like I was going to throw up just all day watching this number climb, because that many people were going to be reading my book. And that was terrifying. And of course, that was my best sales month ever. Like, everything just happened at exactly the right time for me. Everything went so well. And it was my best sales month ever. And now my historical romance series is my most popular series ever. That's, people love my contemporary, but like, I feel like the historical is much more what I'm known for. Um, and I couldn't have predicted that, and I was excited about the BookBub, but if I had known how many people, like if I had known at the beginning of the day how many people were going to download the book, I would have been terrified. And I was terrified, like watching it happen, but I don't know if I would have, knowing how many people were going to download the book when I sent in the application for the BookBub, I don't know if I would have been able to make myself do it if I'd known that was gonna lead to that many people. But of course I should have, because it was incredible for my career. It was incredible for my readership. But like it would like ignorance was bliss in that case. I didn't know that I should be scared.
Well, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about with like what were we scared of at the very beginning of our career, there's so much that we weren't scared of because we didn't know that we should be scared of it.
Right.
Like we did like I think like logically, intellectually, I knew that like bad reviews were a possibility, but I didn't know how it felt to get a bad review until I got a bad review. And then after that, there was that fear of getting those bad reviews. Like before it, I was kind of like, oh, I can handle it if somebody doesn't like my book. And then I got a
Right.
1-star review and I was like, well, this is the most horrible thing that's ever happened to me. Like, this does not feel good at all. So then after that, there was more of that fear of, you know, people not liking my work. I didn't
Right.
know that I was going to be scared of that until it actually happened. And then I was like, oh, this is why people are always talking about, okay, yeah, now I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. So
Yeah.
there is, you know, there is kind of, again, that correlation of like, the more you know to be scared of things.
Yeah. Oh man. So do you remember what your first scary thing was that you did after because I told you I was doing, and I wish I could remember where I got it from because I definitely got it from someone else of just like trying to do a scary thing once a month. I was trying to do a scary thing and I was really happy with that. Do you remember what your first thing
I don't
was?
remember if it was the first scary thing I did, but it was the first like big scary thing I did was when I applied for the Reveal book box.
Mm.
And I remember that was like one of those things that I was like literally like having a panic attack, like my heart racing, like gasping for air, like as I filled out the application
Right.
and mailed them my little manuscript and everything. And you know, that was the first in that line of scary things that I did that was like, oh my god, this is huge. Oh, actually, now that I've talked about it, I do remember the very first scary thing was I signed up for the micro coaching with Becca Sai.
That's
Because
right.
you and I, we had been talking about strength so much, and I was
Yes.
like, okay, this is going to be a thing that I was going to do because like I was having so many issues with social anxiety and everything at the time, and like meeting new people and talking to new people, that the idea of just talking about my struggles in front of, up to 10 strangers was like, why would I do this to myself?
Right.
But you had convinced me that it was going to be so good for me that I was like, all right, fine, I'm going to do it. And then, so the scary thing at the beginning of the month was signing up for it, and then the next scary thing was actually doing it. And like, I don't know if you remember this, but like the day of, I was like, I need you guys to not let me talk myself out of doing this.
I do
Like,
remember that.
I was like panicking as I was getting ready to get on the call with Terry.
Now
And
you
now
love
he's
it.
like one of my favorite people. I love
Right.
him, and I've learned so much about myself
And
from
Terry
the
was the one who
coaching.
was like, "This would make a great podcast
Terry
topic."
was the one that was like, when I told him all about the scary thing a month and like all of these great things that I've done, he was like, you need to make videos. And then he was like, you know who would make good videos with you? Golden would make great videos.
Well, I love talking shop always.
So what would
I
you remember what your first big scary thing was when you decided to start doing it?
I don't. The first one I remember doing was reaching out to see if Lexi Blake would be in come to my group for my 10-year authorversary party that I was doing. Um And I don't know if that was the first one that I did or not, but that one stuck out in my head because I idolize her, and reaching out to ask her to come be part of my party was, like, so terrifying. And unfortunately, she was going through a health thing at the time, so she had to say no, and I'm like, "No, it's fine." It's like I didn't even need an answer. I just had to do it because I had to do a scary thing.
Just had to do it
Um,
because it was my big scary thing, and you could have just ignored me, and that would have been fine too. Like,
um, but yeah, I mean, I've been doing it for so long now. And it's interesting. The more I do it, the less things there are that I'm scared of. Now it's almost more like, okay, well that's intimidating. So I guess that counts because I'm just not scared of much anymore. It is kind of this like rinse and repeat, and discovering um that it leads to good things makes it a lot easier to do it.
Yeah, I think so. I think like it's one of those things that, well, and I think it's kind of like a almost like a bell curve. Like you
Mm,
start out, at least I think we both did, where you start out where you're kind of not scared of anything because you don't know that you're supposed to be
right.
scared of anything. And then as you learn more, you grow and like now everything is scary. And then
Yes.
once you start doing all of the scary things, then it's like, oh, okay, this
Not so
didn't go.
bad.
So now you're back down on kind of like the
Right.
downswing where like you said, things feel intimidating, but they're
Yes.
not like bone chilling terrifying
Yes.
anymore.
Yes. Thank goodness, because I can do it. I mean, there's still, there's still stuff that I'm just like, ah. Um, Getting asked to do like a newsletter swap with Sky Warren, just thinking like, oh my God, like, what's that gonna do? I don't want her to be disappointed in like my, what she gets from my newsletter, and all these like anxiety ridden thoughts that go through my head. And it's interesting. I think one of my scary things is still public speaking. I love doing it, but I do get stage fright. It is intimidating for me. And yet, one of the things that I want to do is more public speaking and more presentations and helping people. Like, I love doing them. I just get freaked out right beforehand, but I've known that since my theater days, so at least I'm prepared.
Yeah. And I'm
Mm.
kind of the same. Like I just learned last year that I actually really enjoy public speaking, because if you'd asked me this time last year if I would enjoy public speaking, I would have very emphatically said absolutely not. I do not want to get up in front of people and talk
Well,
and like
and the
that.
reason you were public speaking last year was because you were like such and such and this, and I said, "Well, have you done your scary thing for the month yet?"
Yeah, yeah. I had somebody who reached out to me and asked their partner for a public speaking gig had to back out for health reasons. And he was like, do you want to do this thing with me? Like, you're on my short list of people that I want to do this with. And I was,
Wanted the strong word.
yeah. And I was sitting next to one of like my very best friend of all the world, just like best friends in general. And like, she's sitting there and all of a sudden I just like start like hyperventilating. She's like, are you okay? I tell her what's going on and she's like, well, have you done your scary thing yet? And I was like, this is what I get for telling people about the scary.
Yeah.
Which actually,
Accountability.
I definitely, if you decide that you're going to do your one scary thing a month type thing, anybody who's watching this, I would highly recommend getting accountability partners. There are times where it sucks because they're going to be like, did you do your scary thing? And then you have to be like, no, I guess this is my scary thing. And they will push you. Make sure you find people who will push you.
Yep.
But at the same time, like, it's the best thing you could possibly do, because there are a lot of times where I know that I would have backed out of doing the big scary thing if I didn't feel like I was going to let other people down if I
Yes.
didn't do the big scary thing.
Yes. And then the big scary thing ends up being so helpful to you.
So helpful. So helpful. And like I said, like now I know that I love public speaking, and like I fell in love with it like just a few minutes into our presentation. I was like, this is amazing. This is like being on stage again. Like, cause I grew up being a dancer, and it was,
Mhm.
I loved performing. And, so then it was like, okay, this is kind of like my new performing thing that I love to do. But I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't done my big scary thing for
Yeah.
the month and said yes to that person who reached out and was like, hey, do you want to do this with me? If I wasn't doing my big scary thing a month, if I didn't have my accountability partners, all of that, I would have probably said absolutely not. I will cheer you on from the from the crowd or whatever.
Yep.
But I did it, and that was probably one of all of the scary things that I've done, that's probably been one of the most life changing,
Yeah.
because it was kind of like, for somebody who has the level of social anxiety that I have had in the past and still have on occasion, like, it was kind of worst case scenario was getting up in front of 100 people and giving a presentation about something. And it's like, okay, well, once I've done that, saying
Everything
hi
else
to
is less
somebody,
scary.
Right. Saying hi to people that stop by my table at a book signing, that's nothing. I just stood up in front of all of these people and gave a presentation for an hour. Like,
Yeah.
now
And
I know I
I
can do it.
honestly, I think that now at this point, it's like when I do find something that legitimately scares me, I'm like, I have to do it because I've seen how much good comes from doing it.
Right. Right.
Um,
You're like, okay, well, it's almost like that fear is kind of like your confirmation
do the
that this is
thing.
something that you should be doing. That you're
Yes.
like, oh, okay, that scares me, which means that it's a big deal.
Yes.
So I should definitely do it.
Like biggest thing, most recent thing that like the only thing I can think of in the past 6 months that legitimately terrified me was calling Turn the Page, which is Nora Roberts bookstore in Boonesboro, Maryland, calling them and asking them to stock my book because I'm a local author. And that legitimately still like that was something that terrified me. And not just because I had to make a phone call and I'm a millennial, like that was probably part of it. Um but, like and I know like and I you know what, honestly, I don't know that that'll be, like, amazing for my career, but I know that it feels amazing. I know that it felt amazing when I called and they stocked not 1 copy of 1 book, which is what I was hoping for, but stocked multiple copies of multiple books, and, just the other day, I got to go down there, the books had come in, I got to go down and sign them, which is amazing.
The same night that Nora Roberts was doing an actual
Yeah.
signing at her bookstore.
Yes.
Like, it
Yes. And,
wasn't like just
like
any old Thursday. Like, it was a big deal Thursday.
right. Yeah. And, and one of the things that I'm scared of now is the manager, when I talked to her on the phone when she ordered my book, she talked about, oh, well, maybe sometime you could be a girls' night out signing author. And so I'm like, all right, well, scary thing now is going to be reaching out probably over email because I only have so much bravery in me, but also I don't want to like harass them on the phone about this. I want them to be able to respond at their own convenience. But sending them an email and saying like, hey, attended the girls' night out, had a blast. Thank you. Also, thank you so much for stocking my books. And if you need a local girls' night out author, I would love to. And that will also be terrifying, like being in Nora Roberts' bookstore signing books, but I want to do it. And I know that it would be good for me.
And now that you've said that, because we had that call a couple of days ago with some of our author friends where we did our author bucket lists about
Yes.
big things that we want to do, and there's so much overlap there between like the big things that we want to do as an
Yes.
author and also the things that terrify us the most as an
Yes.
author.
Like, I would love a TV show or movie out of my books. It is also legitimately terrifying for multiple reasons.
Yes, I
Um,
think that I would probably physically be ill if somebody like approached me and was like, "We legitimately want to make a Netflix special like
my heart's
miniseries," or
beating a
like,
little faster. Like, my
I'd
heart
be
is
like,
beating a little faster just thinking about it,
right,
It's like,
like,
it's that little rush of like, because it's next level. It's maybe a level or two above the next level.
and
But
it goes back to that being seen more. If you're doing things like a television show or a movie or something like that, and you're doing it on even a remotely well-known platform, you are expanding your audience exponentially. And,
right?
real talk, expanding your audience like that also means running the risk of expanding your audience to people who don't like you. They don't like what you write. For both of us, we write kinky romance, so it's a
Yep.
little bit more niche
I mean,
sometimes.
E.L. James gets so much hate. E.L. James
Right.
gets so much hate,
So
you know?
there is that, that very real risk that being seen more is going to lead to more negativity
Yeah.
coming into your spaces. And that's something that you have to like weigh.
On the other hand, you're also going to be surrounded by buckets of money and a ton of positivity from the people who love your books. Like, Are there people, like, who had never heard of Julia Quinn before who now, like, thoroughly dislike her? There are. They're out there. I've seen them. But there's also this I mean, Bridgerton. You like
Yeah, I've never read a Julia Quinn book, but I love the Bridgerton series
Yeah.
on Netflix. Like, yeah, so yeah, there's always that, like, you have to. I think that, you know, I think going into it entirely with the rose-colored glasses of like, oh, if I do this scary thing, then it's gonna boost my career and everything's gonna be amazing and it's gonna be all roses and rainbows, and it's like, there is that negativity and there are sometimes downsides that come with it. But I mean, I would think that both of us would say that the pluses and the positivity outweighs all of it so much. Like,
I will
it's
happily
not
take
even really.
Bridgerton success. I don't even need Bridgerton success. I will take Lucy's score or Ruby Dixon's success. Like, absolutely. Like, but also that's why Bridgerton success is scarier because I'm like, oh, that's scary. But that's that's the next level. Like that's Lucy Score's next level.
Yeah.
So all right. Well, I think this was really good. I hope those of you watching enjoyed this. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. We'll check them out. We're going to do this again in a few weeks on May 29th, possibly with a guest. If you have any suggestions for guests, please let us know. Stella, you have a release tomorrow. Tell us about that and tell us where we can find you.
I do have a release tomorrow. It's the final book in my Lost River Little series. If anybody's been reading that, there's a character who, she's kind of everybody's big sister throughout the book. She's a widow and she's hilarious. And everybody has been begging me for her story, and she gets a very dramatic happily ever after. It is one of those books that I tend to be a little bit more of a fast burn author. This is more of a slow burn for me, but it starts out with the drama on like page 1, which was and I had so much fun writing this story, and like I love everything about this book. So
So what's it
it's
called?
there forever, Daddy. And it comes out tomorrow. Well, midnight
Yay.
tonight, I guess.
And where do we
So
find you on social media? What's the
um
best places?
probably Facebook. I'm on Facebook under Stella Moore. So I've got a Facebook page and then just like my regular Facebook. So whichever one, that's where I am the most.
Awesome. And I am Golden Angel. My main thing going on right now is I have a Kickstarter that is going to launch next Tuesday, the 21st. Special edition kinky historical romances. And so you can find that on Kickstarter. If you search for Golden Angel, it'll come up. And I am mostly on Facebook and TikTok. And on TikTok, I'm a Golden Angel Romance. So yeah, we'll see you guys all in a couple weeks. I hope you enjoyed. And we'll talk to you later. Go do something scary.